Hello, welcome back to Wotter Future. Last time out, we were joined by Dr. Olga Franchak for a great conversation about changes in culture, particularly with regards to equity, diversity, and inclusion. But this week out, something a little different. We're joined by Jeff Molander. Jeff is founder of Communications Edge. Now, I met Jeff through his posts on LinkedIn. Very, very insightful sharings about how to spark curiosity within individuals as opposed to persuading them from a sales aspect. And this links into various elements of psychology and communication as a whole. And I found Jeff's insight really interesting. So I'm really grateful to have him with us today. He's a founder of the Spark Selling Academy. That's his usual haunt. And I'm grateful to say that I know him through that as well. So Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Mr. Fraser. Hopefully I have something interesting to say.
Well, you usually do, so I'm reasonably hopeful. Let's give it a go. So everyone does know the first question by now, I hope. It is, what is the biggest issue affecting the world of work right now? What do you think, Jeff?
Tough one. I've given it some thought, and I'm not exactly sure how to express it, but I'll do my best. I think the problem... one of the biggest problems for me personally that I've experienced is people don't want to think anymore. So there's various ways that this manifests in my life. It's who I hire, why I hire them would be one. I want to hire people who don't just want to be told what to do, but who I want to think for themselves. And in fact, I want them to think about our business and what's good for our business, but also what's good for them. I just want people to, to think. I think that's what one of the biggest problems is for all of us is that most of us would prefer to just be told what to do rather than think. So I like this quote from Thomas Sowell, who says, read it here to get it correct. The problem isn't that Johnny can't read. The problem isn't even that Johnny cannot think. The problem is that Johnny doesn't know what thinking is, and he confuses it with feeling. I think this is what Sowell says some very brilliant things, but this is, I think, very relevant to your question, which is, because this is a problem, confusing, how we feel with what we think. And then also, I suppose, not wanting to think anymore because maybe it makes you uncomfortable. It puts you outside of your comfort zone. And that's kind of the realm that I work in with my business, is helping people communicate in a different way that oftentimes feels awkward to them. But once they try it, they say, well, that feels very natural to me. I don't know why I was doing it the old way to begin with. And I said, well, probably because you haven't stopped to think about any of this, right? Because we would prefer to be told what to do, usually by marketing. If you're a salesperson or a small business person, you've got a marketing mentality and you're kind of like, okay, well, I've seen what marketing looks like and that's how I'm going to project myself. I'm going to talk about myself basically. Mm-hmm. But what we found is that the best way to learn, to engage with somebody who probably doesn't want to talk to you at the moment is to get them curious in you, much like you would on a first date. If you just sit there and talk about yourself the whole time, no one's going to have any curiosity. They're not going to ask any questions. You're just going to be sitting there talking all about yourself. It's going to be a pretty short date, most likely. Same thing happens when you're trying to market your business or talk about your business. Most people default to this, talking about myself thing because, well,
that's what we
I
know.
don't have to think about it, right? That's just, why would I have to think about marketing? Marketing is just telling the world about me. And unfortunately, that isn't what usually engages people the most. So anyway, I think that people not wanting to think anymore is one of the biggest problems that we have, whether we're hiring people, whether we're trying to market our company. I guess those are the two places that I can speak to today with you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I suppose there's a sort of number of elements that I can see that kind of come out of that. There's a question of sort of almost societal expectation with regards to sort of work and thinking. I'm not I don't know about whether your experience is different, but I don't know that necessarily we've come from a world where people used to think a lot. It may just be that the skills need to change somewhat. If we look back to the sort
Well,
of the
we could outsource, right? We would, like McKinsey and all these big, right? These big strategy companies. Isn't that their whole thing, right? We just outsource the thinking. We pay for it. We don't have to think ourselves so much. I don't know if that's what you're
yes,
getting at,
absolutely.
but
Well, it is somewhat. I mean, McKinsey was founded 100 years ago, so there's this isn't necessarily new that we just kind of
right.
outsourced our thinking, kept it
Yep.
easy. And another thing I've noticed and sort of pondered on is, if you look back to, for example, the 70s, 80s, and before that, large companies would have armies of invoice clerks and post room people and all of that, and yet technology has just kind of changed that. So those sorts of jobs are fairly, they're almost like manual labor, just with a stamp rather than needing to lift heavy things, and so they don't really require thinking. Now we're in a world where we've kind of taken away those clerical jobs, and instead we're
Right.
looking at jobs
I
that
see what
actually
you're saying.
require the
Yeah.
thinking. So I suppose what I'm wondering is are people thinking less, or are they just required to think more? And it kind of creates the same gap.
Wow, that just blew my mind. Yeah, you're right. I mean, we're living in the information age. So the information age is all about being able to process the world, the inputs that we're being given and the outputs that we're expected to be given. So yeah, it's more than just manual labor. It's funny. I've moved from a very urban environment where I've spent, my whole life, probably, I'm 55 years old, and now I'm in a very rural area where, people, many of them have for generations been growing their own food, raising animals, and, real labor, the
Yes.
actual. So I find
So to
myself
keep
doing
it
some
away from
actual
me, I don't
labor,
know how to do
right?
that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I find myself struggling, because there is not a lot of. It's interesting that you brought this up, because there's not a lot of thinking involved. The thinking, it's behavioral, it's generational. People they know how to do stuff because their dad taught them or their grandfather taught them, and it
Yes, so it's
generally.
skillful, but it's not
Right,
cognitive.
right, right. Exactly, right. And there's a lot of intelligent design in that, built in, whether you realize it or not, as
Of
like,
course.
I'm taking care of these swine, in a specific way. Well, but there's very specific reasons why the people have learned in the past that you would do it this way. But then again, I guess actually taking care of pigs is actually relevant, because there's a lot of, I don't know if you follow permaculture, but permaculture teaches us a completely different way, of much easier way to actually take care of live animals, that works with nature, that is completely blowing the minds of, for the last 100 years. Um, it just seems to me that a lot of people don't have those practices, but I guess if we go far enough back in time, maybe they would. But anyway, getting back to your point of, yeah, we have to think now, because we're in a completely, in the business environment in particular, we're forced to think, because we're dealing with information more than we ever have been in the past. So sorry about the whole
Yeah,
tangent on the on the
no,
pigs and the animals, but
tangents are good. Tangents are good. It's reminded me of a quote, and I'm afraid I don't have it in front of me, so I probably will get it wrong. But Justin Trudeau said something along the lines of, "The world has never moved as fast as it is now, and it will never move this slow ever again." And I think this is a really interesting, idea. It's the world is just going to constantly accelerate, at least in the foreseeable future. Who knows what 300 years looks like? But for the foreseeable future, the world's just going to accelerate and accelerate. And change, requires cognitive thinking if you want to be ahead of the change, or at
right.
least sort of
So the
keeping
change
up with
comes
it.
slow still.
Well,
Is
well,
that
the
where he's going with
change.
that?
No, the change is fast already, and it's only going to
Mm-hmm.
get faster. I think is what he's trying to say. And I think I wonder whether this kind of change. If we look back to the last 100 years of labour, it sort of didn't change a lot, and then sort of computers came in, and some people had computers, and then more and more people had computers, and now everyone's got computers, and now there's better software, and it's easier to get software quicker, and so all of our kind of business processes have become sort of streamlined through technology. It's taken away a lot of that kind of manual element of the work.
Certainly automation, right? With
Exactly. And I
you don't
think
have to think
it's
about things. Yeah, the machines will
precisely
think for you.
exactly. And so I wonder whether we've kind of accidentally we've done a couple of things. We've found ourselves in a world where we need to think more, but we're still in a mindset where we don't need to think at all.
Yeah, this manifested. I probably shouldn't share this, but we want this to be in.
You are live
No.
on TV,
I will share it. No, I will share it. Just to be provocative, I will share it.
The names was changed to protect
the names will be well. I will say that my in-laws when they relocated to a city that I also decided to relocate to. And when I relocate somewhere, I need a GPS, right, in my car to be able to figure out where the freaking Whole Foods is, right, or the Best Buy. So I need to, because I need my stuff, I need to drive my car, and I don't know where I'm at right now. But I'll do that for a couple of weeks, but I won't rely on it. However, I found that my in-laws, like 6 months later, were still using the GPS to go to the grocery store. And I'm like, it made me uncomfortable. I was like, have you forgotten how to navigate the world without a GPS? I mean, these are the same. So I think like the danger is like in this example, right? We're not going to bother ourselves with thinking about what road connects to what road. I'm just going to let this machine tell me what to do. And for me, I was like, hell, if I'm doing that, I want to know where I'm at when the machine goes off, or I don't want to be reliant on, I mean, I'm not like one of these gloom and doom, there's going to be a, what do they call it? EMP attack, which is real. Right. But, so that I am actually thinking about that, but that's not what motivates my behavior. And what motivates my behavior is I don't want to rely on this thing. Why do I want some machine? I don't want to dumb myself down. And maybe I'm in the minority of people that behaves that way, but I think that's what you're describing, right? Is like we can just automate ourselves into this. Maybe I don't think you said this, but we can just become we're not conscious anymore. At some point, we become unconscious, so the automation just takes over, and we don't do anything. But if for whatever reason that automation goes away, the electricity goes out or whatever, oh my God, I'm completely helpless.
Yes,
I don't want to be in that position.
Of course. So I'm curious. This is interesting. I think we can kind of largely sum up what we're talking about potentially as sort of lazy thinking, using kind of heuristics and quick hints just to feel our way. Back to your quote, feel the way through the world as opposed to think the way through the world. But I'm curious to see how have you seen this kind of manifest itself within business, within companies. Can you think back to examples either of yourself or people you've worked with?
Yeah, I'm tending to give a lot of examples that are not in the business realm, right? Well, I mean, I can tell you that I've had an assistant, or I will say a colleague, a full-time virtual colleague / assistant, and maybe I should draw the distinction. Like I used to have a virtual assistant, and she was well paid, but was really just kind of tell me what to do, and I'll do what I'm told. And but today I've moved into a realm where I forced myself to hire somebody who would bring me more than that, who actually would challenge me. And so I would make a list of like, I want these, not just qualities, but I want you to do these things. So I developed a set of criteria of behaviors that I want this person to offer me as part of their job description. And yes, I'm telling them what to do. You need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do that. We have systems, so you need to learn the system. I want you, however, I want you to do the very boring work of running the system. We have webinars and we do emails, and a lot of this is just very boring stuff, but there are new processes to invent. There are better ways to do things that I don't know about yet because I can't see it. So I need you to bring to me those things. I need you to criticize the website. I need you to criticize me and how I make a presentation, how I'm speaking to our customers. I need you to offer critical thought, and so I need, and for younger people, it seems I'm finding it's easier for them For older people, they're a little more, reserved and timid about, well, I don't know what Jeff's going to think, really. But then I've got younger people. You would think that younger people would be more timid about, well, Jeff is, twice my age or what have you. I don't know if I can talk to Jeff that way. But they're actually quite open to it. So sorry, I forgot your original question was, I kind of went off there.
The examples that you've seen within business.
Oh yeah,
of this kind of thinking.
Yeah. So, when it comes to who you hire, I had a hard time finding people who are willing to actually think for themselves and think critically. And but once you find people who are almost like the guy who referred me to my colleague at the moment said, "You're going to love this guy. His mind is a blank slate, but he's very hungry to learn, and he's very creative minded. You just need to hire him. Hire him now. He's available. You need to do this." And he was so young, I was a little bit hesitant, but he said, "No, that's an advantage. Use that to your advantage." So I think young people, seems to me, do come with less baggage, I suppose, and I remember when I was in my 20s, I was in critical thinking mode. I'm figuring stuff out in life, in business, and it came natural to me versus someone who's already set in their ways, who's older, like me. Who, so I try to keep myself in this realm of, hungering for more information. I mean, outside of who you hire, I suppose also our customers. I'm finding that it's very difficult to find customers who want themselves challenged, who want a coach to say to them, or colleagues to say to them, because we have peer coaching in this academy, to challenge them and to say, no, you need to think differently. I'm going to make you a little uncomfortable with what I'm going to give you some tough love right now. I'm going to call your baby ugly. I'm going to tell you that you don't know what you're doing, because you don't. But the good news is, here's some better options for you. You tell me, you try this, and so I think, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but there are people who want to think and who love thinking and are addictive to thinking. And then there are people who just want to be told what to do. And this, this can be seen. I think, quite honestly, I think the people who want to be told what to do just create problems for the world, the business world, for the planet. Too much of us lay down and just do what we're told to do. And too often we're taken advantage of by forces that are not looking out for our best interests.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a sort of economic question in its own right, isn't it? Because there are still jobs out there that require manual labour ultimately, and maybe those powers that you mentioned, that, as not it's naive, of course, to think that everyone wants the same out of life as you, and i.e. that everyone wants the best for you, because that's everyone ultimately wants the best for them, and that's what they're really focusing their sort of time and effort on. If those things don't line up, then you kind of got to be a little bit wary. That's certainly true. I think it's there's a few parallels that I can draw to my own experience of work, because like you, I don't want to work with people who just kind of do what they're told and then come back and say, what now? Because I believe that the way that we're going to affect real change and change and improve the world that we live in is to be questioning everything, to be saying, is this really the right way? Like, if someone comes to me and says, well, this is how we've always done it, I'm like, I couldn't care less, because that doesn't make it right. You might be good at it, and that may be a decent reason to continue doing it, but I think you need to go and have a look whether it's still the right thing to do, because the world's moved on. Even in the last 6 months, it's moved on. So I think this is kind of interesting sort of element. One of the ways that I've found to push this is with regards to learning. So we run a Blinkist book club, where we go through a book summary every fortnight. So everyone reads the same sort of 20 to 30 minute book summary each fortnight, and then we get together and we discuss what we've learned. And funnily enough, the one that was coming up, I mentioned it just before we started recording, was Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, which talks a lot about the different ways that our mind works with regards to this kind of feeling he would call system one, and the thinking he would call system two. But I have found that simply pushing people to constantly learn inherently reminds them they don't know everything. which I think is a very good way to kind of move through this sort of lazy thinking. If you're constantly aware and okay with the fact that you don't know everything, then you're constantly searching for the ways that you will know more. You can never know everything, but you can learn more. You can say, well, hang on, am I doing that right? And if you're not questioning that, you're not improving. You're stagnating. Another great quote that I found is that, even if you're on the right tracks, if you stand still, you still get run over.
And I think I think it was Socrates that was one of the great thinkers, one of the early thinkers that pointed out that it's knowledge is not something that you gain. There's always more knowledge. There's a quote there also. I don't remember what he said, but this is an ancient. Yeah, this is an ancient conversation. But we're living in a modern age where a lot of this stuff, I think, gets thrown away, quite honestly. And I think the human nature, perhaps, is that I just want to. We're lazy, like you said, and but it's interesting. You had mentioned earlier something that made me think of. I don't know if you know the American comedians Penn and Teller,
Yes.
but Penn Jillette. Oh, you do, good. Penn Jillette is a brilliant person, brilliant comedian, and he was on a podcast that I listened to. I've listened to it 5 or 7 times. Describing, he went on for like 20 minutes, just nonstop, talking about the beauty of repetition, and that in his performance art, and he was saying, just like any kind of professional service that would be rendered, or really, something that you would even manufacture, no matter what business you're in, it's a performance art. And he said that, there's power in repetition, and there's power and in switching your mind off and just doing it. So he would do these magic tricks. He's got the world's record for number of times a magic trick has been performed.
Right.
So and so nobody's done this stuff, more than he has, over and over and over in the history of the world. So, but he says there's a danger there, but there's also, it allows you to, when you switch off your mind, there's a danger, but it also allows you to improvise and come up with, on the fly, new forms of artwork, new ways of doing things, to your point, that invention, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I think that also ties back in with, the thinking fast and slow idea that people who get very, very good at a system 2 task, such as playing chess, the grandmasters almost convert it into sort of heuristic system 1 thinking. Like, for them, they're not, they say, grandmasters are thinking 10 moves ahead, 15 moves ahead. But actually, I think what I've read is that actually what they're doing is kind of thinking in patterns and larger ideas around the sort of the chessboard, rather than plotting, if I do this, then he does this, and you do this, and et cetera, et cetera. But when you're learning chess, or when you're at a lower level, that's how you have to think, because you haven't moved into this kind of pattern-based controlling the board, where you control it. And so I think it's interesting what you're saying there about Penn using repetition. I feel that's moving the kind of system 2 thinking into system 1. Another example we see of this is when we learn to drive. First time you get in a car, everything is quite overwhelming. You're worried about what gear you're in and what the revs are, and where's the clutch, or maybe not if you're in America because you don't drive stick shift. But
the manual transmission is a perfect example. I see where you're going. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. Because it becomes second nature to you.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. As does everything in driving. But I think this is interesting. So we've touched on this sort of almost psychological, and in a sense, we've touched on sort of philosophical differences between the thinking and the feeling, and the fact that we are, through potentially no fault of our own, potentially through societal expectation, various other elements, we're pushed into this kind of very quick kind of thinking. Maybe we're just too busy, or feel we're too busy, whatever that kind of reason is. I'm curious to move it into kind of the second question now, about, if we could fix this, if we could get everyone to be a little less lazy with their thinking and start to push that thinking, what would the world look like in 5 years' time if we could move that, and if we sort of keep it, we're talking broadly here, but if we keep it somewhat within the business realm of,
Yeah, right. I
what
mean,
does that look
it
like?
really depends on where you want to narrow down the world, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, well, again, I'll say something that maybe I shouldn't say, but I just remember the great George Carlin, and he had a bit. The comedian, for those who might not know, you should know him, and you should Google, go on YouTube and look for his
Practically a
comedy bit.
philosopher as well as a comedian.
Right? Yes, exactly. A master of linguistics, but one of the greatest comedians that will ever have lived. But he has a bit on how America, and really the West, is fueled on bullshit. And then, of course, there was a great book called Bullshit Jobs written. And, there's this, there are issues like quiet quitting and all this kind of, then there's on one side, then there's AI on the other side. And, so there's a lot of tension here. I think a lot of that tension can go away if we, in the future, if we, the bullshit jobs and the bullshit, jobs that beget jobs that beget jobs, jobs that are not jobs, right? And all this bureaucracies, corporate, private, and public, a lot of that goes away if, I think, if we would form a more thinking-oriented business realm where you would have to think again, right? So maybe there would be more people with firing synapses, and there would be more companies in America in particular that would not be zombie companies, and there would be banks that would have sound money involved. There would be a lot of less, in George Carlin's words, bullshit, unnecessary jobs. There would be a preponderance of necessary jobs and valuable products and valuable, like if you look in the realm I work in, where there's sales, marketing software and sales software, you can argue about what the percentage is, 70 or 80% of it is unnecessary, like, but it powers the economy. So I think a lot of that would go away. And I think that's why, I don't know that it ever will. I think you'll have to throw out, there'd have to be a market crash or some great catastrophe for a lot of this to change. But yeah, what would it look like? It would look more productive, I think. I think we would progress into, businesses that deliver actual value. I mean, I hate to be so negative about it, Fraser, but I think there's a lot of companies that are delivering a lot of value that isn't valuable. So unnecessary products, unnecessary services, being gobbled up by budgets that are unnecessary, right? So it would be, I guess the world would look leaner. Maybe I'm making this up as I go along. It would look leaner, right? It would be lean.
I think that's a really interesting observation, that on a small scale we can see that kind of lazy thinking leads us to sort of small errors or incorrect assumptions, or whatever, and that when we think about them, we see the error in our ways. But as you sort of point out there, I think when you expand that up to a scale of, I don't know, 1,000 employees, or 10,000 employees, or whatever, if everyone is being just a little bit more lazy than they should be, even if it's relatively small margin, that expands into the kind of thinking that I mentioned. This is how we've always done it, and there's a role,
it's a culture. Well, it becomes a culture, right? Yeah.
And the culture, one of the things that there's a great saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can have a really smart person, or you can go and get a consultant in or whatever to come up with sort of new ideas. But if your culture is inherently lazy to the thinking and to the new ideas, then it's not really going anywhere. And so, the first kind of thing you have to do is start almost like you said with, with your associate, a younger guy, not necessarily with lots of sort of experience to back things up with, but a real willingness to go and think and challenge the status quo. If you can create that thinking at the ground up level, dare I say, you might not even need the consultant at all because the idea might come from inside. Interestingly, I don't think I've mentioned it on this podcast yet, but the reason Wotter is called Wotter is because we created what we did with an idea that, what if we could create a world where actually everyone cared about their jobs? Because most people don't care enough about their jobs. And we can't remember who because there's some beer involved, but either myself or my business partner turned around and said, "What a world that would be." And that's where the name came from. But
Cool.
I think a lot of the issues that mankind is facing, even on a big macro level, how to reach net zero, with carbon. There's some political element of more political pressure. There's a financial element of more investment, but actually there's also a more technological element. If we can make things that fix these problems better, like solar panels.
Right. I mean,
vastly
this
better
is
over the last 20 years. But
this is the biggest opportunity. Absolutely. Right. There are real problems, societal and business. There are real problems to solve that are not getting solved. Certainly in the world of politics and the public sector, there are problems that are not getting solved because we have people in charge who don't want to think and don't need to think, who have put everybody else to sleep, and companies the same, leadership of companies who have thousands or tens of thousands of employees that aren't thinking because they don't need to think. And this doesn't promote critical thinking, and the lack of critical thinking doesn't promote advancement of humankind, and certainly, I guess, to my earlier point, businesses that actually provide good stuff for people and for the planet and for other businesses. Necessary stuff, I should say. Necessary, good, and good. Good is kind of one of those things, but necessary to the advancement of capitalism and progress.
Yeah, and there's a kind of parallel to where we're going to at the moment. There's political discussions. There's various things about is capitalism right? Are our political systems right, etc. I think we should kind of leave those to one side rather than diving further in. But I think what we're really agreed on here is it's interesting that this lazy thinking really isn't it's an individual human problem. And we all kind of have a responsibility to ourselves to go and
big time
learn as much as we can, to go and experience as much of the world as we can, because we're here for a relatively short amount of time, so we might as well make the most of it. But there's a problem when you then put lots and lots of people together and you create the culture. You create the culture which doesn't look at critical thinking, it doesn't look at learning, it doesn't look at how should we do something new. And what I find interesting about this, I'm curious to get your thoughts, is there's a psychological block, right? That learning and thinking feels effortful, and it's more comfortable to stay in the realm where we are because some sort of change in ourselves takes effort and decision, and that bit's difficult. But actually, it's beyond that. It's really not that difficult to buy a book and read it. For most people, or to find a mentor or a coach, or join an online academy, or whatever it is that you need to do to just say, how can I be better at this thing that I do? Whether that is customer service, whether that is manufacturing, whether that is farming and looking after pigs, or whether it's selling, whatever that thing is, just a sort of decision of how can I get one step better? You don't even have to tell everyone else. You just have to just do it for yourself. Like that alone is a powerful move.
Self-improvement that leads to increased confidence in your private life, in your business life. I like to say you only have to experience it once, maybe 3 times. I think to your question about what would the world look like, the world would probably have more people who have experienced that. My fear is, like, for my kid, that he'll never get a chance to experience that. And that's an emotion. But it's left and right brained. It's system 1, system 2. It's once you experience this growth, this invention, maybe you grew as a person emotionally, maybe you created something that you didn't think you could create. You experienced an emotion that you didn't think that you could experience. Once you've done that, if you don't hunger for more, you're not a human being. I mean, so I think that's the natural state of humanity, is to hunger for this. I think a lot of our world has beaten that out of us. We've been told we don't need to think, we can afford to be lazy, and in fact, we can. I mean, there's a huge hungry market for people to come punch the clock and not really do much for their job. There's a huge market for that. And that doesn't fulfill somebody. That doesn't fulfill you like growth does. So I don't really fear for my kid. I just want to make sure that my kid is put in a position that would be my fear, that he would experience that. So I think, maybe we look around and there's not a lot of that available to us. If that's the case, then we need to work somewhere different and surround ourselves with different people if we want to make it. Do you see what I'm saying? Where
I do.
Coming from there?
I totally do. And actually, I mean, this is, I think, what we should all be aspiring to. It's not to say it's easy, but it is to say it's worth it. And I think that idea that you've put forward there is just that really sums up all of this. Go and find that change in yourself, in your surroundings, in your people, that gives you that feeling of I did that. Wow. And
I wonder what else I can do.
Exactly.
That's natural.
What next?
That's right. I mean, who wouldn't feel that way? You'd have to be unconscious to not feel that way. And I pity the person who doesn't feel that way after they had the initial feeling. Yeah.
I think we've summed that up really quite perfectly there. There's an amazing world out there, and it starts with just picking up that one thing that we can do differently. It's been such a pleasure, Jeff, to talk with you today. It's been a roundabout tour of pigs and moving GPS and thinking and feeling, and poor old Tommy who it's been brilliant, fantastic to have you with us. Look, if anyone listening wants to hear more about you and connect with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, come over to academy.communications-edge.com, and you can learn all you want. And I really appreciate the opportunity to think with you, Mr. Fraser. You asked me some questions that actually made me think. In real time, no less. Hopefully those answers that I gave made some sense.
Absolutely.
I appreciate having to think.
No, it's a pleasure. And of course, you're also available on LinkedIn. Of course, that's where I met you, and very grateful to have done that. Look, Jeff, such a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Cheers. Hello, if you enjoyed today's episode, please do like and subscribe. If you want to find out more about me, you can find me on LinkedIn. Or if you want to find out more about what Wotter's trying to achieve, then do take a look at our website. Links to both are below. Thanks so much for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you next time.